And with us this week are Ellen Adams and Melissa Peck with the Adirondack Coast Cultural Alliance, which is a collaboration of museums, libraries, and galleries that have teamed up in Clinton County to promote the North Country's history, cultural heritage, agriculture, and tourism. Welcome. It's so nice to have you here.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
You have a big event coming up this weekend, your 10th annual Museum Days. We'll talk about that in just a moment, but first, let me get your thoughts and reaction to the Maritime Museum and Art Cone putting forth this recommendation to raise the Spitfire, one of the most famous shipwrecks in Lake Champlain, preserve it over several years, and then make it a centerpiece of a maritime or military museum somewhere on the New York side of the lake. As historians, what do you think of that idea?
I think it's a really wonderful opportunity. Obviously, our maritime and naval heritage is a really important part of our history here on Lake Champlain, and having something like the Spitfire being the centerpiece of a museum dedicated to that heritage, I think could attract really big audiences. Obviously, this is a national story as well as kind of a local story.
I think it would also be a great opportunity to highlight another aspect of this area's history, you know, the American Revolution in our community. Obviously, another opportunity to attract a different sort of audience of visitors. We currently promote the Battle of Plattsburgh in the War of 1812, and we have museums in this area that are specifically dedicated to that interpretive role. But I think having this sort of institution would again bring light onto this another aspect in history that would draw visitors here, and I think it would be wonderful.
And I know they haven't said which community in New York may get the exhibit. It could be Plattsburgh, it could be, as Art Cone said, it could be Fort Ticonderoga, it could be Whitehall where the boats were built. But for Plattsburgh, if it were here, that could have a huge impact, as you said. That could bring in thousands more tourists who would come to see that, and then while here, look at the other museums and learn about the other history of the area.
Absolutely.
This is an idea that has been floated for several years. There have been consultants who have told the Chamber of Commerce that this could be a major attraction for the town and city, to have a waterfront attraction like this, a museum on the waterfront to showcase the region's military history. They've always talked about building replicas, though, ships that could be the centerpiece of these museums or of this exhibit. How big of a draw might it be to have the real thing? One of Arnold's gunboats from the Revolutionary War is the main attraction.
I think having the real thing would be an amazing opportunity, because you get to talk about the sort of process of raising the shipwreck and then all the preservation work that goes into actually being able to put an artifact on display. So you'll have the end result eventually where this ship will be available for viewers, but you'll also get to learn about the whole process of, you know, how do we get from the bottom of the lake to a museum display? And I think that's a really exciting opportunity.
Absolutely, and I think it also opens the door to bring sort of specialists to this area. You know, you're getting a new type of expert here that's able to sort of view everything else we have. So, you know, there's certainly a lot of benefits to having the actual ship come up, you know, have it preserved and on display, and have the community take part in all of that sort of education, and I think it would be great.
It's going to be busy this weekend. This is the weekend that 17 museums and galleries team up for Museum Days. All 17 will be open all weekend, and admission is free?
That's right. It'll be Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 4. There's free admission, so a lot of the museums are really using this as an opportunity to showcase new exhibits, to provide programs, family activities. For a lot of the museums, some of them are really only open seasonally, so this is a great chance for them to sort of kick off their season, you know, and we invite the public. We generally get around 1,500 visitors each year to these locations.
You mentioned some of the special exhibits. What are some of the highlights or special exhibits at the museums this year?
I know if you're sort of traveling outside of Plattsburgh and you're in a different region and can't really make it into Plattsburgh, although we hope that you will, the Lion Mountain Mining and Railroad Museum is hosting a new military exhibit, as well as the Ross's Point Champlain Historical Society. They have military themed exhibits and they're beautiful locations. We really encourage people to go outside of Plattsburgh also and not just stay, because these museums are wonderful. They take a lot of effort to run, and it really gives them a chance to showcase what they
And these
have.
may be some of the museums that folks aren't as familiar with. As you said, in Lion Mountain, there is this wonderful museum dedicated to the town's history, to its mining history. And so this is perhaps one of those weekends that this would be an opportunity to discover that museum.
Absolutely.
And a new participant for Museum Weekend this year is the Coopersville Schoolhouse of History in Champlain. So that is a one-room schoolhouse. It's, I think, the former school number 9 in Champlain, which closed down in 1931. And they'll be talking about what education was like in the days of the one-room schoolhouse. And they'll also have some special exhibits. I think there'll also be story time in the afternoon as well. So that'll be, I think, a really great opportunity for people to see a little bit of local history there.
Coopersville, just south of Champlain and Rouse's Point,
Exactly.
on the way to Chazy. Yeah.
Yes.
And for you are the director and curator at the LST Miner
That's
Museum in Chazy. And do you folks have some special exhibits lined up for the weekend?
Sure. Well, we don't have any special exhibits, but we do have some activities planned. So if the weather cooperates, kids and their parents will have the opportunity to play some historic games on the museum grounds. And then we'll also have some hands-on activities inside the museum. Folks can learn how to make their own quill pen, and then do some book binding to create a book that they can then write in with their pen.
Alice Miner, of course, the wife of William Miner, the railroad industrialist, the magnate here in the North Country, who provided so much to the North Country, built the first hospital here, and really in that community in Chazy and West Chazy and West Chazy, true benefactor.
Absolutely. And the Hearts Delight Farm Heritage Exhibit actually has a new display that they'll be premiering this weekend, which is an exhibit and actually a kind of diorama of the hydroelectric power system that William Miner built beginning around 1909. So that's going to be a really great addition to their exhibit.
Tell us about the main campus, some of the museums that folks may be a little more familiar with, dedicated to the military history. There's the War of 1812 Museum. Right across from that is the Plattsburgh Air Force Base Museum. And we know for the weekend, the War of 1812 Museum has a special exhibit set up. It's a cabin one of the soldiers would have lived in back in the day during the War of 1812.
I know that just opened this weekend, and I saw a release that mentioned that it was actually built to, based on the findings from the dig.
There were soldiers stationed here that camped out here in the years before the famous Battle of Plattsburgh, which of course was in 1814. Before that, there were troops here, and they spent a couple of long winters just outside, over near what is now the airport in Plattsburgh. And as you mentioned, there's been archaeological digs there over the past few years to find evidence of these camps, Pike's Cantonment, as it's called, and they found that evidence, and this cabin has now been constructed based on the evidence that they've found over the past several years.
That's right. It's pretty amazing.
Right.
Some of the other museums, and they're also close, they're within walking distance of each other. The War of 1812, Plattsburgh Air Force Base, the Champlain Valley Transportation Museum, which has a new beauty of a vehicle, a 1929 car that's been added this year. Just an incredible selection of vintage vehicles there. Then from the Transportation Museum, just a short ways into downtown Plattsburgh, for the Kent Lord House, which of course is famous for the Battle of Plattsburgh as well.
Yes. Right, so the Kent Lord House is probably best known for its connection to the Battle of Plattsburgh, but one of its longtime residents, William Swetland, was a director of the Delaware and Hudson Railroad and was kind of instrumental in getting that connection between Plattsburgh and Montreal. So they're going to have an exhibit premiering this weekend, kind of talking about that railroad history, which is, again, another really important part of our kind of local heritage, that kind of transportation network, building those ties between Plattsburgh and Montreal, and kind of how that contributed to the kind of cultural and economic life of the region.
And Melissa, you have co-authored a new book on the history of the Plattsburgh Air Force Base, both Army Base and an Air Force Base. And that's coming out within the next few days. You're going to have a book signing this coming week on the 20th of June at Valcourt Brewing Company. And I guess that's so appropriate to have it there on the old base in that beautifully restored old stone barracks building.
We are so thrilled to introduce this publication to the public. It's sort of a culmination of many years of efforts that when I was the director at the Clinton County Historical Association for 4 years, and we had got a grant through the Lake Champlain Basin program to see this project through, and it was a culmination of a bunch of events that we had done locally through the museum to really promote this 200-year history of the barracks. Of the base, the military reservation. So we're so excited to see this, in print, and to really look at it as a ready reference for the public, and to the community, for visitors, to really have a better understanding of what is really here, what is down here, because it's amazing.
You teamed up with historian Rich Frost to write this book. And you just mentioned, I think maybe a lot of people may not realize how far back the history goes. Of course, they're probably familiar with the Plattsburgh Air Force Base, but long before that, it was an Army training ground back in the days of the First World War, and even prior to that. So how far back does the history go?
Well, we we really looked at even the prehistory and looking at the strategic importance of the lake and how it had always been a contested sort of territory. And then, we really started after the Battle of Plattsburgh, because it was then that they realized that this location was extremely strategic and important for military reasons, to have this as part of a military reservation, its strategic significance. So we really start from there, and then we give this whole timeline. The men that were stationed there at one point were responsible for building the military turnpike, and the men that had trained there for World War I, the Plattsburgh Idea era. There's just so many important elements of history that happened here at this location that people really don't know about. So once you go down there and if you have a chance to read this book, you will look at this place totally differently.
You mentioned the Plattsburgh Idea. Folks may have heard of that through the years. That, again, was during the time of World War I.
Right.
What was the Plattsburgh Idea?
It was sort of a military preparedness initiative, and it really got into full swing in 1915. Officers, trainees were sent here from downstate, and they sort of spent the summer here doing a lot of rigorous military training to prepare for World War I, and they were actually some of the first soldiers to be sent over.
Now, some of the proceeds of the book are actually going to the Clinton County Historical Association.
That's right. This book was funded through a grant from the Champlain Valley National Heritage Partnership, the Lake Champlain Basin program. And all of the proceeds from the book will actually be going to the Clinton County Historical Association.
Fantastic. And if folks are interested, how can they get a copy?
You can actually pick them up right at the museum, 98 Ohio Avenue, Plattsburgh, on the Old Base Museum campus. And while you're there, stop and visit some of the other museums.